Thank you for joining us today. My name is Tom Van Der Rostein, and I serve as the president of the Louisville Forum. We meet on the second Wednesday of every month at Vincenzo's Restaurant. The Louisville Forum is a nonpartisan public issues group founded in 1984. The Forum hosts debates and discussions of contemporary and sometimes controversial public policy issues that affect the greater Louisville community. Although we may take up issues that have a national interest, we try to highlight the local perspective. For more information on the Louisville Forum, our programs, or to make reservations, please visit our website at louisvilleforum.org, or you may find us on Twitter. Our topic and speakers today are a community tug of war, Louisville's planning and development vision. Several planning and development issues have roiled the Louisville community as of late. Examples are Topgolf, the Lexington Road high-rises, Colonial Gardens, and the Whiskey Row development, just to name a few. Prompting a question, what is our city's vision on this front? What are the development versus preservation issues facing Louisville? How much should economic development and building modern attractions matter when deciding to change things or buildings? Is Louisville a destination for millennial talent? And if so, what can we do with our planning and development decisions to affect that issue? I'm now going to introduce each of our three panelists that were gracious enough to come today. Steve Porter. Stephen Porter is an attorney who specializes in land use law, historic preservation, and environmental law. He owns the real estate brokerage and consulting firm. He also runs the 1840 Tucker House Bed and Breakfast. He is an adjunct professor at the University of Louisville Brandeis School of Law and an alumni fellow from 2012 to the present. He teaches local government law and land use and planning law. He received his Bachelor of Arts from Duke University in Political Science and Religion in 1965. His Juris Doctor from Louis D. Brandeis School of Law at the University of Louisville in 1968. During his time at the University of Louisville Law School, he invited Martin Luther King Jr. to speak at the U of L Law School in March of 1967. He has been on the Louisville Metro Planning Commission, Policies and Procedures, Committee Neighborhood Planning and Preservation, and numerous other boards and committees during his time here in Louisville. He is originally from Middleton, Ohio, and now lives in Louisville, Kentucky. Our other speaker today is Nicholas Pregliasco. He practiced at a large regional law firm before joining Barden, Werper, Talbot, and Roberts, PLLC. He concentrates his practice in the areas of land use, real estate finance transactions and workouts, real estate litigation, bankruptcy, low-income housing tax credits, and general corporate law. Nick graduated summa cum laude from the University of Kentucky in 1997, and then magna cum laude from the University of Louisville Brandeis School of Law in 2001, where he served as the articles editor of the Brandeis Law Journal. He has served as chairman of the Louisville Bar Association Real Estate Section and the KBA Condominium and Community Association Law Drafting Committees. He presently serves as on the board of directors at the Building Industry Association, the BIA of Greater Louisville. Our last speaker will be Vince Jarboe. He chairs the Louisville Metro Planning Commission and has been on the commission for the last 7 years. He's the owner of Vince Jarboe Insurance Agency. He's the president of the Southwest Dream Team. He's also the co-founder of the Pleasure Ridge Park High School Alumni Association. He has his Bachelor of Arts in Political Science from the University of Kentucky, and he has been married for 25 years and the proud father of 2 children. And now I'm going to let Mr. Porter take over. Thank you. Let's give a hand to Mr. Porter.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be here. When I was in college, I was one of the founders of the Duke Forum, and we had outdoor forums on the quad and had some great discussions, and those were the days of civil rights and Vietnam War and draft card burning and everything else, so you can imagine what it was like. I want to tell you, because of a lot of publicity lately, Cliff Ashburner and I have been having a lot of fun, right, Cliff? I want to tell you what I do and why I do it. Every lawyer has 2 allegiances. First, to the law, and second, to his or her clients. In zoning cases, my legal allegiance is to the Kentucky statutes, the comprehensive plan, and the land development code. I also represent my clients' interests as long as they do not violate the law. Recently, I have been publicly and personally accused of, quote, profiting off of fear and trying to stifle Louisville's growth, end quote, by the president of GLI. Privately, he has told me to take a grateful parting bow. In addition, he refused my invitation to meet and and to explain our views. If he had accepted, I would assure him I am in favor of well-planned growth and promise him I have no intention to cease my representation of neighbors and my support for ordered and responsible growth. Here are some examples from my career. You all know about the buildings known as Whiskey Row, now to include Old Forester, Duluth Trading, 2 hotels, restaurants, offices, and apartments, and recently called by local officials one of the finest blocks in the country. But do you remember when the previous owner applied to demolish most of the block and filed a suit against the city in federal court to get permission? Luckily, my clients, a group of preservation organizations and a next-door neighbor, joined the suit. When Metro changed its mind and asked Judge Haburn to allow the demolition, we were able to convince the court not to go along. Then a group of angels moved in, Todd Blue moved out, and the buildings were saved. Our local comprehensive plan says historic preservation is a priority. By the way, I represented those clients pro bono. Now to Walmart, but not the one proposed on West Broadway. Many years before that, Walmart proposed a store next to my clients in Richlawn. Walmart first proposed a wooden fence and a lighted sign on its 24-hour operation. When I revealed the fence was treated with arsenic and would adjoin my clients' backyards, and the lighted sign would shine over the fence into the bedroom windows of my clients, Walmart backed down, and the fence became a brick wall, and the sign became the only Walmart sign in the country that is not lighted. Now to 18th and West Broadway, the other Walmart case, where my clients were mostly African-American individuals and neighborhood organizations from the Russell, California, Portland, and Old Louisville neighborhoods. Their objectives and lawsuit had 2 major claims. Number 1, that the proposed Walmart store structure was suburban in location on the site rather than on the street, as required by the code and as all other developments were required to be. And 2, that the Planning Commission at that time, the membership, as appointed by the city, was illegally constituted because there were too many members with a financial interest in development and too few minority members, both violations of state law. We appealed the case to court. By the time the case was complete, Walmart changed to a whole new story strategy and backed out of over 400 new stores, including that one. Now, what do we have going there at that location at 18th and West Broadway? We have the new headquarters of Passport Health Plan, a $100 million plan for a health and wellness campus with 13 buildings, the major ones fronting on Broadway and including offices, retail, housing, and spaces for nonprofits. Walmart was maybe 500 jobs, 375 part-time and most low-paying. Passport's plan will result in over 1,000 jobs, most full-time, well-paid, and with benefits. By the way, the membership of the Planning Commission now complies with state law. Also, by the way, I represented those clients pro bono. On East Broadway, the Neighborhood Association objected not to a new Thornton's, right across from Cave Hill Cemetery entrance, but to the plan to demolish an end-cap historic house in a row of architecturally and historically significant houses. We got the house declared a local landmark. Thornton's staff prepared a plan that saved the house and that the neighbors would support, but corporate vetoed that. So Thornton's went away. Now a new pizza restaurant is planned there, a real win for the neighborhood. In Fisherville, the Neighborhood Association wants to protect our last living stream, Floyd's Fork, from added polluting nutrients that result in algae blooms and fish kills. So we have filed a local court action and are considering a federal action under the Clean Water Act. Finally, Topgolf. In addition to the fact that the applicants for the rezoning, permits, plans, and waivers were companies that did not exist, and that the Planning Commission and its staff admitted that it bought hook, line, and sinker the various reports paid for by those non-existent applicants and did no independent research or analysis on the issues of lighting and noise, and that they accepted without question the opinion of a paid-for lighting consultant who admitted he had never been to any Topgolf and had never seen any of the lighting, and then criticized the objecting neighbors for not doing what should be the job of the staff and the commission. I can promise you nobody in this room would want to live in the houses of my 6 clients who have filed this lawsuit, or many other nearby houses. The entire neighborhood will be changed because of the 175-foot poles, that's 17 stories, and the extreme lighting till 2 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the morning every night of the year. Make no mistake, my clients and I believe Topgolf should come to Louisville. I have visited 8 of them around the country. Topgolf should come to Louisville somewhere. However, they have no business being close to single-family houses. Only 3 of their over 50 locations are. We believe this violates our comprehensive plan and our code. If this is built at Oxmoor, the whole community will realize what a mistake it is. Thank you for this opportunity. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And now, Mr. Nick Pregliasco.
And I think both Chairman Jarboe and myself will stay seated when we talk, just because going forward we're going to have more of a discussion, a panel discussion as well. And I have maybe a little bit less formal comments in this regard, but I wanted to really talk about predominantly what we see from a development perspective, representing developers. We work with Steve very often. He's not only a wonderful attorney, but a friend. But you can kind of also explain in doing so with some of the friction that is caused that results in some of the items that Steve mentioned. As far as Louisville, I think the overall gist of where things are, Louisville is currently a largely built environment. And I'm talking about Louisville as the Louisville Metro, the specific area, not the entire MSA. And with regard to that, really, I'll talk quickly about residential and then office commercial. But residential development, currently we have approximately, from the best we can tell, about 12,000 lots left in Louisville Metro that are available to be developed. We came to that through working with, about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, worked with all the land planning engineering firms. That was Bill Bardmerper, my law partner, and myself did that, along with David Mendel, who's here, is one of them, who helped very greatly in that process. But we had realized there wasn't an accurate or a complete map of or listing of what is really the development to come. So what we had done is created a sheet that had, spreadsheet really, but it had 120 different projects. These are all projects that are either under construction, they're projects that had been approved but hadn't been constructed, they're projects that were in the process of being approved, or they were just projects that were property that would be developed eventually. It was clear this was property to be developed. Anyway, with that process, we went through and concluded that there was approximately 12,000 lots left, single-family lots, and approximately 13,000 apartments. The reason this is important is those, well, not only did we calculate all of them, but then we also put them on a map. And with regard to residential development, the growth corridors are all really, Shelbyville Road, Taylorsville Road, and Bardstown Road outside the Gene Snyder. Those are the areas that there's still land. That's where the majority of the projects that we're working on are located. And we had handled probably more than half or the majority of the apartment projects over the last couple of years, but right now currently represent at least the 6 major developers of single-family lots. And through that, we were able to kind of see the pattern as far as where things are going. But more importantly, there is the availability of sewers is really is one of the main items that you're determining where things can go, what areas can be developed with that. There were certain areas that may, just from a look, is natural for growth. It would be probably an area that people think would grow, but there just is not the either sewers available or the ability to bring sewers in the near future. And then of the 12,000 single-family lots, approximately 5,000 of those were located in the Floyd's Fork area, the area that's a part of the Floyd's Fork Small Area Plan. That is the process that is ongoing right now, and that's one of the reasons there's a lot of interest in it, is that, from a development perspective and from a growth perspective for Louisville Metro, that's on a single-family residential side, that's where things are trending and where things are going. Because of this, the easier properties, and I say the easier property, the properties that have available utilities, that have great infrastructure already in place or that would make sense, a lot of those have really been developed. So now what is it from a Louisville Metro perspective we're finding is that the projects are harder or more difficult. There's more infill development, and that often just tends to create more friction, things that, with some of the projects that Steve mentioned, that just is a natural result of that when you have that. But just to put those numbers in perspective of approximately 13,000 apartments and then 12,000 single-family lots, before the real estate crash, we were averaging about 3,000 single-family building permits a year. It had obviously dipped very significantly after that, but the reality is, while we have just completed the comprehensive plan, the 2040 comprehensive plan, going out the next 20 years, which the forecasts for that were that we would have to grow 160,000 persons to continue our current growth, our current path of growth. And they're just, Louisville really is already constrained, but will continue to become more and more constrained going forward. So that I expect to see really more infill development, and also the projects that are going to have maybe more concern or opposition. I think with regard to the opposition, another item that had occurred is prior to the recession in 2008, there were so many developments, so many projects coming through that once the real estate crash occurred, we in Louisville Metro really went for a 3-year period from 2008 to almost 2012 where there was no major subdivision filed. There was no application filed. And when we had actually worked and came in with the first one, the planning and design staff even said they didn't have some of the people that had ever processed one for the turnover. So what is also, the other thing that is occurring that is leading to some of the friction is that when you go from quite a bit of development, new projects, to almost no new projects, to now we're again speeding up, you find that more and more, there's it's just a different, you're coming from a different baseline, so to say. But that's really on the residential side. And then on the commercial office side, the other big item is going to be or has been, the East End Bridge, the new bridge downtown. They're, inside Louisville Metro area specifically has, by significantly less space, available land, available infrastructure that River Ridge does, for example. And so you're finding a lot of new projects going there. So what I think really this comes down to is, as Louisville, if we're looking to grow as a city, or even just to maintain the growth that we project to continue on our current path, as I mentioned, to 2040, we're really going to have to determine, how to make that happen and make it happen in a way that works for growth, but also works for the issues that we go through with the land use perspective. For example, with these projects, if these are outside the Gene Snyder on these various corridors, if those properties are not developed, they don't become new residences, those people or those persons will ultimately just move to one of the surrounding counties. It'll be Oldham, Shelby, Spencer, or Southern Indiana. And the end result is the tax revenue does not come to Louisville. We lose that. But then what I think a lot of people also don't realize is that if people move out there and live out there, they use the roads because they come to Louisville or come to downtown to work. So they're creating more of a burden on the infrastructure, but not there's no tax revenue related to it. But I think those are just general items as far as the where things are, and it's really just becoming more and more difficult from a growth perspective, and those are some of the reasons that have caused more and more whether it's friction or issues with the projects that you're currently seeing.
Thank you. And last but not least, Mr. Jarboe.
Okay, thank you, Tom. As Tom said, I'm chair of the Planning Commission. I'd also like to thank the Louisville Forum for inviting me to be part of this panel and offer some insights into how the Planning Commission functions. There are 10 members of the Planning Commission. Like many other Louisville Metro boards and commissions, commissioners are appointed by the mayor, come from a variety of backgrounds, and are volunteers. The time we spend as commissioners is time spent volunteering to the city and comes outside of our careers. The Planning Commission is charged by state statutes to administer zoning and subdivision regulations and to prepare a comprehensive plan to serve as a guide for development of public and private property. We review the development applications submitted to the Louisville Metro Planning and Design Services, and then in many cases make a recommendation to the Metro Council or one of the other 12 municipalities within Jefferson County that have zoning authority. In 2018, we'll hold 38 Planning Commission hearings, including 12 night hearings, some of which last until midnight or after. In addition, we hold over 50 committee meetings each year. When there is much public interest in a case, a hearing can take a few hours because public comment is vital to our process. Planning and design staff, which serve as Planning Commission staff, follows policies to notify neighbors when a development is proposed near them. We then invite neighbors to provide us with their thoughts either by mail, through direct correspondence with staff, or at a hearing. We even give residents an opportunity to petition for a meeting to take place at a venue near to them as opposed to the old jail auditorium at 514 West Liberty Street, where we regularly hold meetings on the first and third Thursdays of the month at 1 p.m. We have held hearings at venues like Moore High School, the Southwest Government Center, and the East Government Center. When reviewing a development application, our guiding documents are the comprehensive plan, which describes a vision for the city, and the land development code, which details specific design and dimension elements. We review a plan and make a determination based on its adherence to the guidelines of the comprehensive plan and criteria of the land development code. City staff recently completed an extensive and thorough community engagement process which touched over 6,000 individuals to update the comprehensive plan, and that new plan will go into effect on January 1st. Because it was created with heavy involvement by residents, the comprehensive plan is the community's vision for growth and development. We are charged with implementing the comprehensive plan through our review of cases submitted to Planning and Design Services. And finally, we encourage all residents to engage with the Planning Commission and development in their area. You can sign up for email notifications from Planning and Design Services at louisvilleky.gov and clicking on e-news, email, and text reminders at the bottom of the homepage. You can also stay up to date with case information through our online portal, which can be found by clicking Search Case Information at Planning and Design's louisvilleky.gov homepage. Thank you again for this opportunity to join you today, and I look forward to the discussion. I would be glad to talk about who we are, what we do, and how we process applications, but will not be addressing any specific development cases today so as not to interfere with policies and procedures of the review process. Also, just to let you know what a chairman does for the Planning Commission, my job is to run the meeting. You know, I'm not there to influence the fellow commissioners. There's 10 members. They all listen to the evidence that comes forward for the applicant and for the opposition, and I'm the last person to speak. When we get to deliberation, everybody speaks before I do. So it's, you know, if I was the first person to speak, they would maybe think the chairman is trying to influence where that's going. So everybody else has the opportunity to speak, and I'm the last one. So I know, basically, on almost every case, where we're going. You know, whether they're going to vote for it or we're going to vote against it by the comments and the deliberation of the fellow commission members. So my job is to keep it running on time, to let everybody speak, to continuously ask if anybody in the audience would like to come up and speak. Because a lot of times people shout out things from the audience. It's like, whoa, no, wait, come on up to the microphone and speak to it. We want this to be an open process where we take all of the comments from the public that we can. So we just want to make sure that everybody realizes that part of what we try to do. You know, and a lot of times there's controversial things that happen, and, you know, an aside that I wanted to tell this group is that the opposition sometimes will bring 100 to 150 people, and when somebody gets up and says something that everybody there likes, and I certainly understand the passion and emotions of everybody cheers and screams, and I'm trying to stay, you know, I'm trying to keep control of the meeting, so I'm like, please don't do that. It doesn't work. You know, nobody listens to me. The next person that says something, everybody cheers. And really all it does is takes time away from whatever, you know, for what we're trying to do. And I think one meeting I actually said it. I said, look, if we were going to be influenced by people cheering, an applicant could bring in 100 people, and whenever the applicant said all the things that they think follows the comprehensive plan, everybody stands up and cheers. You know, we don't make our decisions based on that. We make our decisions based on whether they follow the comprehensive plan. And we've got a roadmap for that, and we take all the evidence we can. And if a applicant gets up there in front of us, for the most part, planning and design has kind of determined that a checklist, whether it checks it off that it follows the plan or checks it off that it doesn't follow the plan. And that's the roadmap that we use to determine our cases. So that's the information I wanted to make sure we knew.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
And now we're going to take some questions that have come from the audience. And, well, we have an additional questioner, Dan Hartledge, also with the board. Dan, the first question, please.
Thank you. A lot of projects and development projects were mentioned. One that was not mentioned was the one that's being discussed at the Grinstead Drive, Lexington Road area. I think it has a name now, but I'm not sure what it's called. Anyway, if each of you, all three of you for that matter, could comment on what those projected plans are and the pros and the cons.
Yeah, I'll start just because our firm is representing the applicant in that. That is Jefferson Development Group. One Park is a really a wonderful, innovative project, but most importantly, it's a perfect location for a project of that type. There's not really there's no other location locally that would work for a project that type. It work as well, but also even in other cities, you know, there aren't areas like this, which is drastically inside the Waterson Expressway. It's very close to downtown. It's not downtown, but it's close. Has the infrastructure that's located there, and by that I'm saying that it's right next to I-64, and it's at the convergence of Grinstead and Lexington. So it has that. Just from a functional perspective, it checks the boxes, but then also from a neighbor perspective or a perspective of those who live around it or impacts. I mean, ultimately, the comprehensive plan is simply an impact mitigation document, and how do you address and mitigate your impacts. And that is a property where on one side there's a cemetery, the other side's the expressway, and then the other side is a 200-acre park. So it is a location where something of this size that can really put Louisville on the map from that perspective. It is a project that you see in other comparable cities such as Nashville or Indianapolis or Charlotte, but it's one that it's in a great location for it here locally.
Mr. Porter?
Yeah. Couple of things. First, I think this is one that Vince will not be able to talk about because it hasn't come up yet in front of the commission, so he'll probably bow out, right? Yeah. And before I get to the One Park as the development, I want to point out that a former predecessor of Vince's, Donnie Blake, is here in the audience, and I want to congratulate Donnie for a great job that he did when he was chairman of the Planning Commission. So, thank you, Donnie. This is the One Park development at Grinstead, Lexington Road. I represent the Lexington Road Neighborhood Association. There are 4 neighborhood groups that converge right there: Cherokee Triangle, Irish Hill, Crescent Hill, and Lexington Road. They are in the process of probably joining together to discuss this proposed project. I'm not opposed to that project. Basically, it's a great location for something to go there, and I think that's the way my clients and probably a lot of the other people feel. The question is, to use the word that Nick used, impact. How much impact will there be by 3 30-story buildings versus a lesser development? How much impact on traffic, impact on view, of the size of the buildings, impact on lots of things. And that's what the commission will have to determine, and that's what I hope that these 4 neighborhood groups and Nick's firm and I and others can try to get together and come up with a solution there. But it's a great location. Something should be there. Is there anybody else in here who remembers going through the drive-through at KT's to pick up liquor at that location? I remember that before I was 21. Now I never partook, but a lot of my friends did.
My only comment is that I know it's going to be a very complex case, and I believe it's probably going to be a night hearing. Yeah. A very big night hearing.
It'll be a big night hearing, I'm sure.
And if I could just, how long would a process like that, is there a set timeline, or how long would that normally take? Or
As far as the hearing itself?
A ballpark figure for the whole process?
Well, it's been in process for a few years now, and I'm not sure where they are as far as when the plan is coming to us.
Yeah, this is actually a project that has been in the process for years. It's been over 2 years, really, since this was originally proposed and worked through it. This was it's a rezoning for a planned development district, so essentially it's just creating a district for this. As a result, we had a series of charrettes, which are meetings to allow the people in the area, the community, to be involved in the process. So this is one where, because of, I think there were 7 total meetings, public meetings like that, which are very similar to a neighborhood meeting. Because of that, the majority of the kind of the information, getting information out, but also dealing and addressing issues were kind of handled all on the front end before the official filing. But as far as the process where we are now, it has officially been filed. We would expect or hope to have a Planning Commission public hearing the very beginning of the year, by February, some in that range. Kind of depends on addressing some other issues, but it is coming here very, very soon.
And I would also, the night hearing, whenever it's scheduled, would probably start at about 6:30, and I can envision probably 50 to 60 people that will want to speak. So that meeting is going to go well into the wee hours of the morning, depending on where the venue is. Sometimes we have to, as Topgolf, the University of Louisville had the space. We had to be out by midnight, so that's why we had continuances on that case. And the chances are this is going to go very, very late into the evening, and maybe another one that might have to be continued at time. That's what happens at Planning Commission hearings, especially night hearings.
Thank you. Next question, please, Jim.
All right, this question is for any or all of you. It touches on the timing issue. It says, in all litigation Mr. Porter described, his clients were unsuccessful, but market forces led to changes in the projects during the years of delay. Is this the most efficient process?
Well, let me talk about it. First of all, the state statutes and the code allow for anybody who objects to the decision made by either the Planning Commission or the Metro Council to go to circuit court. And the loser, if you want to use that word, has that choice. That might be the applicant. Sometimes it is the applicant when they get turned down. And I might say that it's not very often that applicants get turned down. A few years ago, a study was done, found that 97% of applications were approved in some fashion. Which tells you the big wall that my clients are up against sometimes. But the statute provides for an appeal to court, and if the clients think that there are problems with the process, it's not just a matter of a wrong decision. It's a decision that's made in what the statutes call arbitrary and capricious manner, what the case law says. And if they are, and if the person who's filing the appeal, again, the applicant or the opposing people, can show that to a court, then it will be turned down and they'll go back to square one.
Nick or Vince?
And with that, one item I wanted to address maybe at the very beginning is the statistic, which I've heard that before, or other ones similar, and that is that such a large percentage of projects are approved. The reality is that that is misleading, and that is when a person comes to us and they have a property that they want to develop, they often say, can this be developed? we start the process, and then it's determined, are there sewers available? Is there infrastructure available? And then once we get past the basics, then we will start work with the applicant to determine, here are the potential impacts of this development. Can you mitigate those? And can you do those on a cost-effective basis? And that is a basis that would, be something that would be in compliance with the comprehensive plan, and we make the argument to that effect, but also one that would be, they could do so in a way that would wasn't cost prohibitive. So then, even once we meet that threshold, there's only less than half move forward. Then once we get in the process, when we start the process, have our neighborhood meeting and determine some of the other issues that maybe we hadn't thought of, then often we will, have a realistic conversation with our clients and the applicant, and then even beyond that, if they continue to proceed, when we get closer to the Planning Commission public hearing, if it's a case that we don't feel that we can fully justify compliance with the comprehensive plan, we don't go forward. So when the statistic is, that such a high percentage, well, really the majority are gone or never even start the process. But as far as the question directly, the appeals, that's always an issue of how do you balance a person's right for their for due process, both procedural and substantive due process, and that being a neighbor or even the applicant, versus the impact that having an appeal or litigation causes, and that is, I think, as mentioned, the time delay. There has been it's a little over a year ago, a new bill passed. It's an appeal bond bill. That is, if you want to appeal a decision of the legislative body or a planning commission, it would the circuit does not apply to circuit court. That's one item that is often kind of misunderstood, so to say. But that is, as Steve mentioned, the applicant has a right to file an appeal, to have it heard in circuit court. It's only when they decide that they wanted to then proceed, or whoever loses, whether the applicant or the developer, to proceed further than that and go to the Court of Appeals to have it then reviewed again, that applies. And I think that really was put in place largely because somebody who is opposed to a project has the right to voice their opposition at the hearing, at the administrative level, not before, but with regard to the Metro Council, then at the Circuit Court level, and then the Court of Appeals is where that would kick in. But that's a way that I guess there's a bill that was passed to address some of that I'll call it friction, but it's the balancing of those different values, different rights that people have.
Since Nick raised the question of that appeal bond issue to the Court of Appeals, that was because of the Walmart case at 18th and Broadway. A local state representative decided that we had done something wrong by going to the Court of Appeals in that case, and so he wanted to pass a law that would require up to a $350,000 bond to be paid by the neighbors, or to be bought by the neighbors from an insurance company, and got that bill passed. I testified against that bill, along with Tom Fitzgerald of the Kentucky Resources Council. It is absolutely unconstitutional. Tom and I are just waiting for somebody to take it to the end. The Section 115 of the Kentucky Constitution says that there shall be a right of appeal, and that right shall be inexpensive. $350,000 is not inexpensive to my clients, I can tell you. So that will be extinguished once it gets there. We almost did it down in Warren County in a case I have, but after we had a hearing over what the amount of the bond was going to be, and we briefed it, the other side said, whoops, we're going to lose this if we go to the Court of Appeals on the issue of whether it's constitutional or not, and they backed off and said, nope, we won't ask for a bond. So that's the problem that we're getting now. So we can't get to court because nobody is pushing it, but we're waiting for that. It'll be declared unconstitutional. It's an awful bill. And at the same time, the Walmart case. Most of you are probably familiar with Scala, the group that David Jones and others founded. David admitted that the Walmart case was the reason he formed Scala. Tell that to Passport Health Plan now. Tell that to the community, and look what we're getting at that location instead of a suburban Walmart full of people, part-time, low paying, no benefits. It's a win for the community. Thanks.
And one thing I wanted to just to go real quickly with that is, while Steve and I will disagree on the bill and constitutional provision, I don't think it's discussed all that here. I think the other item is with that if it is challenged, and it sounds like it would be eventually, I expect it will be. It doesn't mean it will be thrown out altogether. The issue that Steve just mentioned, the constitutional right to an appeal, if the court were to determine that the bill currently sets a maximum amount of $100,000. If it's presumptively frivolous, it could be up to $250,000. But if the court were on that right of appeal to determine that is a number that may be too high, they could always require an amendment, or the bill could be amended. I mean, the point is that it doesn't necessarily mean that bill will be thrown out altogether and would go away. It just may, if there is an appeal or a challenge to it, it could alter it, so to say.
I might also point out that in that bill, sorry, Tom, there was, you were between two lawyers here. Watch out, buddy.
I'd just like to have Mr. Jarboe have a chance, if he wants to comment on
Yeah, go ahead, Steve. I mean, the only thing I'm going to say, we really don't have a dog in the fight. After the Planning Commission makes their decision, it goes to the legislative body. Once it goes to suit, the Planning Commission itself doesn't have anything to do with
Yeah,
it.
there's one exception in that bill. It does not apply to any zoning case for an expansion of a landfill. And that was put in by the senator from Scott County because my clients won a planning commission and fiscal court decision to prevent the expansion of a landfill onto 500 acres in their neighborhood. And so they wanted to, that state senator wanted to be sure that he would protect his Scott County residents so they wouldn't be required to put up a big bond. That's another issue that will probably make that unconstitutional, is because it is special legislation. It only applies in some cases and not in others.
Thank you. I'm sure we have a lot more questions. Dan, if you could, please.
Yeah, we do have a lot more. A couple of questions been submitted regarding the plans for the VA hospital out Brownsboro Road. What's the status, what's the latest, and what's the panelists' opinions of its location?
Would you like to go first, Vince?
To tell the truth, I don't know too much. I mean, I know what I've read in the media about the VA hospital, but as far as how the Planning Commission relates to it, I really don't have any information. I haven't seen anything come forward as far as information towards what we do. I believe it's already zoned. If I'm right, I think it's already zoned for what it could be. So if it's zoned, it wouldn't come in front of the Planning Commission because it's only zoning changes that we take over. Maybe some other cursory issue could come in front of us, but if it's just waivers and variances, then that will go to BOZA and not us. So.
Yeah, and with that, I don't know the exact status of the project, where it is. I think from a personal perspective, I think there were some other locations that would have been better. They could have been chosen, but that's beside that. It's not directly related to this project and where they're going. I know there has been a delay that related to some of the, from really on the federal end with regard to, I don't know if it's financing or making when it is built or things of that nature, but yeah, I think from all I've heard, it will be coming and it will be, I just don't know the timeline on it.
Our process in planning and zoning has the ability for people to have charrettes. Nick talked about there were charrettes on the One Park case at Grinstead Drive, and there were charrettes on this property, the VA hospital site there at Brownsboro Road. And there was a beautiful development that came out of those charrettes, a really nice mixed-use, commercial, retail, residential office development. And then the owner of that land, another blue, found a way to sell it to the federal government. I have not been involved in that case at all. I think it's a horrible location for a VA hospital. There are many other places it should be.
Thank you. Next question, please, Jim.
All right, this is actually more of a comment. It's for any of you or all of you, but it touches on that same issue, mainly infrastructure. It says, as a homeowner in Hurstburn, my concern was not so much the lighting as the traffic increase on Shoville Road at 264. Same issue on 264 at 42 and 22 with the VA hospital. We don't have the infrastructure to handle the traffic. And I guess what they'd like is your comments on infrastructure and how important it is.
And I can start with that one. And that part of this, that question relates to what I was starting with my opening remarks, and that is, in Louisville Metro, we do have a need for infrastructure. We have a need for only improving what we have with new roads and better roads, but also repairing and expanding the roads that we currently that exist right today. And that's why I think it's very important when I was referencing the fact that we have a limited supply of residential homes, and then also, with regard to the bridges, about when projects move to other counties, whether it's a residential project and a homeowner, the subdivision is built in Shelby County or Oldham County or Bullitt County. That's tax revenue that is not coming to Louisville Metro. That's tax revenue that's not going to be here to help fund the improvement of those roads, whether it's, or even infrastructure, whether it's utilities or things of that nature. It's just a loss, but it's really a double-edged sword, or a double loss in a way, when projects move out of the Louisville metro area. And that is, not only is there a loss of property taxes if it's a residential or a project moves out there, but then if it's jobs that are located in other locations, you lose the occupational tax as well. And then, but then correspondingly, those persons still use the same infrastructure that needs to be improved. If somebody lives in Shelby County and commutes downtown, or lives in Oldham County and commutes downtown to work, they're still, contributing to the congestion, but Louisville isn't receiving the same tax revenue to help fix the problem.
I think what I've learned from being on the Planning Commission is a little bit of how the state transportation cabinet works. And when things get onto a road plan, it doesn't mean anything. It can get on a road plan, then it can get funded, and it still doesn't happen because it gets kicked back out of a budget process. There's a project out in the south end called the Manslick Interchange that's been in the Kentucky road plan for 25 years. And it's been funded periodically every other year or so, and then it gets kicked out by somebody, whether it's a governor, whether you're a Democrat, Republican, whatever. It gets kicked out, and it doesn't happen. And a lot of times when plans come in front of us, the opposition rightly says there's not enough infrastructure for this. You're going to bring in 300 apartments or whatever the case is. And what I've learned is that the state doesn't do roads until a development happens. I know that sounds strange. The road work should come in first. But if a state person was here, the state person would say, okay, yeah, we expand a road to 4 lanes, and then the developer goes bankrupt, and they don't bring in so then you've got a 4-lane road out in an open area with no development on it. So they would push back and say, no, you all bring in your development, and then we'll bring in the infrastructure afterwards to make it happen. And that's something I've learned from being on the Planning Commission. That's just the way it works. And our job a lot of times is to educate the public when they come into a Planning Commission hearing, and that's one thing that I make a statement about a lot of times. I know it makes sense. Let's build those roads so that it can handle that development, but that's not the way it happens.
Steve?
I hope Cliff will not use that against me in our battles over Top Golf, but you promise? Thank you. Any new development in any neighborhood is going to bring more traffic to that neighborhood. That's just a fact of life. Let's just face it. It's going to happen. There's going to be more traffic. I live about a mile away from the intersection of Blankenbaker Parkway and I-64. My house was built in 1840. Well, let me tell you, when the Tuckers built that house, the only traffic on those roads out there were the Tuckers taking their hogs to slaughter, and nobody was in their way. It's a lot different now. Papa John's, Southeast Christian Church, and a lot of other retail. So you have new development, and we need new development. We need growth. There's going to be more traffic. Put up with it.
And one thing I just wanted to mention as Chairman Jarboe indicated during his comments is that it's really a point that is very astute and well made, and that is the fact that that often the improvements that do help fix issues that are existing occur after development, and that is that while there may be needs to expand roads, and that is it's only when the pressures of new development often come along that those are realized. As an example, there's been talks for over 10 years for improving Shelbyville Road, Johnson Road, out Aiken Road, that area in the east end, and they were simply talks, and then now there are 6 different subdivisions that are approved out in that area, and now those improvements have been, in fact, been put on the road plan and are being funded and have already been funded. So it is often a case, and it is kind of counterintuitive to people who, maybe view it completely the opposite.
Next question, please, Dan. Thank you.
I guess this is targeted a little more toward Vince, although anybody else can certainly chime in. This has to do with the composition of the commission. According to one questioner, it's mostly white people.
No.
It is not?
No.
Okay, well, could you talk a little bit about that, what the composition is? In terms of diversity, also, the other question having to do with geography, do you have a commission that represents all areas of the city and that kind of thing?
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, I think we have 5 African Americans and 5 Caucasians on the commission at the moment. And there is, and to tell you the truth, I don't know enough about exactly how the commission is supposed to be. Somebody else worries about that. What they try to do, though, is to get, and what Mayor Fisher has told me at times, is that they need other areas of the city, those Metro Council members, to give them names of people that might volunteer and be on the Planning Commission. A lot of times when I do some of the other stuff that I do, Southwest Dream Team and other things, is I talk to people and they seem like passionate and they seem like that they want to learn things, and I ask them to go ahead, why don't you go down and put your name in for a board or commission position, and they don't. They want to talk about it and they want to maybe complain about it, but when it's time to step up and be a part of it, people have work and lives and all that. I understand. Some people can do this and some people can't, but they do try to get more names into the kitty for them to be on the Planning Commission and other boards and commissions, and they don't have a lot of names. They all seem to come from the same general areas, people that do get into this a little bit more, but some of the outlying areas of the county, they need more people to step up and do these kind of things.
When we filed our lawsuit on the Walmart case and contended that the commission was improperly comprised, the state law that set up the Louisville Metro consolidated government, everybody here remembers when it was not Louisville Metro, and in that law, Gerald Neal and other legislators from the West End got a provision in there that said all boards and commissions shall at a minimum have minority representation at least equal to the population. And when we filed that lawsuit, there was 1 out of 10 black members of that, and that was not up to the proper state law. It also said that only 4 members may have a financial interest in the development community, and at that time 6 did. That's no longer true. The mayor's office has made sure now that there are minority members and that there is a limit of the 4 as required by state law. So we're glad to see that.
I would say that sometimes there are mistakes made in that process, because at one point, whoever, whether it was you or someone else, had said that I'm a State Farm insurance agent, and they said I was part of the development group. That I had an interest.
I think in our lawsuit, Vince, we put you down as maybe.
Yeah. I just found, because I saw my name on there and I went, wait a minute, I'm an insurance agent.
There were 6 definite and 1 maybe.
Yeah. I guess I was the maybe.
Yeah, and with that, basically just wanted to add that I think currently our boards, but I say the boards because it's the Planning Commission as well as the Board of Zoning Adjustment, that they do have a very good mixture of, have the diversity. Per the statute in Kentucky, it requires geographic diversity as well as racial diversity, and it is, I think, it is a good representation in that right now. And it makes, I think, our mayor administration, the current mayor administration, has taken it very seriously to make sure that happens. And it also can make it very difficult when somebody who were to step down. If you have a planning commission member who were to the term ends or just steps down, they have. The mayor or who appoints the majority almost of the planning commission, they're not just simply looking in Louisville Metro. Hey, can I find somebody who would be a good person to fit on the planning commission? They say, well, now, in order to maintain this diversity, here's the, both geographically and racially, what we need to do it. So it makes it more difficult, but I think they've done a good job with that.
At that time, there was also only 1 woman on the Planning Commission, and while the statute was not very specific on misogyny, we felt that it was a violation of the spirit of the law that there was only 1, and that has now been corrected too.
Okay. I think we have time for one more quick question, Jim.
Since we have our high school students with us, This question says, eastern population growth creates strains on JCPS. Shouldn't real estate developers have to consider the availability of public schools when expanding eastward?
Let me say, I just met with a group out in Oldham County last night. The Oldham County Planning Commission does take into consideration, and it's part of their comprehensive plan and their code, that they take into consideration the population of the schools and the ability of schools to handle development. We do not have such a regulation here in Jefferson County. And, you know, the last time I spoke to this forum was many, many years ago when the desegregation of the Jefferson County schools was a big issue back in the 90s. And, but we do not have such a regulation where the schools have to be brought into the picture.
And I think with that, as Steve mentioned, Oldham County is the one county here in this area that does have, takes schools specifically into account. But when we were going through the process here recently, I say we, it was the entire community going through the adoption of a new comprehensive plan, the 2040. That was an item that came up. It was discussed very extensively. It was actually one of the probably the hotter or more discussed issues was whether schools should be in the comprehensive plan. And ultimately the decision was, and the agreement was kind of reached, that you can't have it in the plan and you can't have it as a basis. And the reason is, otherwise, you're providing or allowing a unrelated party, this case Jefferson County Public Schools, to dictate the future of where and how the Louisville Metro is developed. If for example, if you had to show, if it was an issue of what is the capacity of certain schools, and that were to be considered as a deciding factor or something in those decisions, then JCPS can decide which area of Louisville Metro develops by where they locate a new school or what school they expand. And essentially you'd be giving the complete power over to a different entity, and I think that was ultimately why it was kept out.
Yeah, another problem we have is that the county school system is a state agency, and they take precedence over a local government. We had a case many years ago, the old Emerson Elementary in the Germantown area. My clients were some Germantown residents, wanted to save the old school. And without getting a demolition permit, the county school system on a Saturday morning brought the wrecking ball out there to tear the building down because they were going to sell it to somebody who was going to build a development there. It's still a vacant piece of land, by the way.
Okay. Any last comments, Vince?
Well, I would just say that we have had some cases that I can remember in the past where some of the people would come up from the neighborhood and say that, you know, our school is already overcrowded, and it's just not something we can take into account as to whether it follows the land development code or the comprehensive plan. I understand where they're coming from, but it's just not something we can make a decision based on that.
Thank you. I want to thank each of these three speakers. I think this is a great program today. So we'll give a big round of applause. As a small token of our appreciation, we're going to give each of the speakers a Louisville Forum Mint Julep Cup.
Not allowed to take gifts.
I hope you, okay. Hope you use it in good health.
That's nicer than the one I got last time.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much. Our next meeting will be held on Wednesday, January 9th. The topic of the meeting will be a debate on the future of the pension bill. The Kentucky Supreme Court is expected to issue an opinion on that case tomorrow. Also, the date and location for our members, the forum's annual dinner has been set. Put it on your calendars for this Wednesday, February 20th. The event will be held at Noah's event venue. The event will feature a rare dual appearance by both U of L President Neely Bendapudi and U of K President Eli Capilouto. More details will follow on the forum website as we get closer to the dinner date. Reservations may be made online for the next forum at louisvilleforum.org or by calling our voicemail at 329-0111. And remember, be nice to people. Have a nice day.
That's a block from my house.
I like your idea of cheering.